global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, a big day here in Washington, D.C. The President is hoping today becomes Tax Cut Tuesday because his tax reform bill is there before Congress as we speak, and he'll be hoping not just for cuts in personal taxation to be approved, but massive cuts in corporate tax to be approved as well, and we'll talk about that as the next hour develops. But today, extraordinary, really. So the Cabinet met today, all 25 members, and they spent an hour and 45 minutes discussing the government's plan for Brexit. And everything was there on the table to be talked about. And yet, at the end of the meeting, in front of the press corps, when the question was asked, they admitted that not once in an hour and 45 minutes did they talk about open borders or mass immigration. And frankly, this is farcical. This was the top priority for Leave voters. Yes, sure, I know. People voted Leave for a variety of reasons, but I think the reason the turnout was as high as it was, a lot of people who never voted in their lives saw this as being the opportunity to take back control of our borders. It's an issue that has been at or near the top of British politics for the last 5 or 6 years, and yet it wasn't even discussed today. And my feeling is the more the public realises that they don't even want to talk about it, they find it too awkward, they find it too embarrassing, I think this could lead to huge public anger because, as you know, the Prime Minister wants to sign us up for a transition period, which she calls an implementation period. What it means is that we will not have any ability to control our borders to people from the European Union until 2021 at the very earliest. And this on a day when Demetrius Avramopoulos, now you've never heard of him, have you? No, well, he's the European Union's Commissioner for Migration. He said today, we cannot and we never will be able to stop migration. He argued that migration is deeply intertwined with our policies on economics, trade, education, employment, to name just a few. And when it comes to discussing illegal immigration and all of those problems, he says, at the end of the day, we all need to be ready to accept migration, mobility and diversity as the new norm and tailor our policies accordingly. So they have, the European Union have effectively capitulated completely on migration coming into Europe across the Mediterranean, and they're still holding firm to the principle of free movement within the European Union. And that is the system the Prime Minister wants to keep us stuck into until at least 2021. They don't even want to talk about it. And I'm asking you, why do you think this issue was not discussed today? Is it because, actually, they believe in mass immigration and they don't want anything to change? And if that's how you feel, you can call me on 0345 6060 973. Or perhaps you think it's because they realise that in trying to do this, trying to deal with this, they may not, from Monsieur Barnier, get the trade deal they want, in which case text to 84850, or if, like me, you think it's because they're too gutless and spineless to deal with this issue, then you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and you can watch me on Facebook and comment there too. Why, in an hour and 45 minutes of the Cabinet discussing plans for Brexit, did they not talk about getting back control of our borders and dealing with mass immigration? I have to say, I'm really, really angry about this. I wonder how Sam in Watford, a new caller to the show, feels on this issue. Good evening, Sam.
Good evening, Nigel. Couple of points I was saying to the gentleman on the phone earlier. First off, the government, I'm sure, has a lot more things to discuss than just simply migration. They've discussed migration to non-stop, like literally since this whole thing started. It was just migration, migration, migration. The majority of the people just literally voted because of migration discussions and conversations and what you were saying during the whole referendum. The second point, they can't possibly, no EU government is going to allow some sort of a trade negotiation or deal without some type of migration happening. And also, migration has been happening non-stop since pretty much the whole planet was, born.
Sam, come on, that's nonsense, isn't it? From 1950 until nearly the year 2000, net migration into the UK ran at an average of 30,000 people every year. And in the last few years, it's been as high as 1/3 10 times what we've known to be the sort of post-war norm. And Sam, but where I do agree with you is it seems to me that perhaps the government is prepared to trade in open-door migration in the hope of getting a trade deal. Isn't that what's really in their minds?
That's not what I was saying. What I'm saying is no one is going to agree to some sort of a trade deal with the UK in regards to the EU without some sort of a migration system or without some sort of a freedom of movement between the UK and the EU.
Sam, we're agreeing. I'm saying that the government seems to think that getting a trade deal at almost any price, 40 billion quid, a continued role for the European Court of Justice, regulatory alignment, and perhaps even free movement of people. The government seems to think that getting a tariff-free deal matters, whatever has to be put on the table, and I hope I'm wrong, but I suspect the free movement of people is one of those things they're prepared to put in.
I think you're thinking that migration seems to be this major and no sort of a thing where you definitely cannot accept that. You cannot accept migration. Migration has been happening forever. It's not something that is bad. It's not something new. Migration was happening, as you said, in the 50s. It was happening prior to the 50s.
But Sam,
the 50s, Sam,
it was controlled
throughout the whole. Sorry.
What the Brexit voters wanted was control over the numbers of people that were coming into our country. That is the main reason that Brexit won that referendum. And Sam, all I'm saying is this government doesn't appear to even want to pay lip service to it. I thank you for your call. Evening, Nigel. We have been done by this government. These people at the top are not affected by immigration. They don't use the NHS, transport, housing, schools. It makes me so angry, says Anita from Thanet. Nigel, no one mentioned immigration because they didn't want to be called racist. The media has ensured that the two words cannot be mentioned in isolation anymore. The single largest issue has been made a taboo subject, says Paul. Well, Paul, I first started talking about this in 2003, 2004, when I was first elected to the European Parliament, way back in history. In 1999, the word immigration didn't even feature on my election material, but it was the opening of the door to 8, then 10 former communist countries with no control whatsoever that made this a key issue during Brexit. And you're right, Paul. Anyone that dares to talk about it gets abuse. But just because you get abuse from those that are never going to agree with you doesn't mean it's not the right thing to take the issue on and to accept some of that abuse. John from Formby, a regular caller of the show. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Nigel.
So why, John? Why, John? How, John, can they spend nearly 2 hours in Cabinet and not discuss this issue?
Well, I think it indicates where it is on their list of priorities. I think we've got lots of problems here. First of all, the key was when May was Home Secretary, she was hopeless on immigration. Cameron talked of getting it down to 100,000, although he sneakily used the expression tens of thousands.
Well, he said it. He said it, John. He said it in the 2010 manifesto, didn't he? They said it again. They said it again in the 2015 manifesto, and then they said it again this year. I don't think, John, they ever meant it.
No, I agree, and I think we need to remember that Blair is worshipped by Cameron and his ilk, and they say things to get elected, but they have no intention of carrying it out. There is this disconnect between the politicians and the people, and the only way they'll get the message, and the status of the DUP proves it, is if enough people vote, hopefully for UKIP, then they can get a massive lever on them. And hopefully we can get rid of some of the politicians who are determined to go against the will of the people.
Do you think, John, if UKIP was stronger in the polls right now than it currently is, that would put more pressure on the government on this issue of open-door immigration?
Oh, and undeniably. I think you used the expression that this issue has been kicked into the long grass. Well, if UKIP start to pick up, then the ball will be very quickly retrieved from the long grass.
Yeah, because I don't believe, even if, because UKIP's not quite as much of a threat as it was, even if in Westminster they think the issue of immigration has gone away, I don't believe out in the country it has. I think it's still, or immigration and the effects of it on people's lives, John, I still believe it's the number one issue.
Undoubtedly. Why should anything change? The more May continues to mishandle Brexit, one is wondering what was the point of the referendum?
Well, quite. That's John, that increasingly, I think, is what people are going to say. I thank you for your call. On Twitter, I get, free movement of people is good for everyone and the economy, just not good for racists like you. Stop trying to convince simple minds foreigners are bad. And that tweet sums up the level of this argument. That those of us that argue for controlled immigration, whereby we control the quantity and, yes, the quality in terms of whether people have got criminal records, whether they can speak the language, whether they've got skills and trades to bring to the country that will benefit society, the counter-argument is to scream, you're all racist. Well, let me tell you, whoever sent that tweet, you are in a very, very small minority, because what polling shows is that 3/4+ of our population want sensible immigration controls, and the Brexit vote was about doing that. And right now, frankly, the politicians are simply ignoring it. Seamus is calling from Watford. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening. Why, Seamus? Why?
Basically, and this is only my view and my opinion, but I think the Conservative Party are, in essence, in the main, are pro-EU loving liberal multiculturalists. They just don't even want to address the subject. In fact, they want to work to the contrary and allow it to. It's like a contagion. Just let it happen and happen and happen until we've got no voice whatsoever.
But Seamus, at every election, whether it's Cameron or May, at every election, they stand up and say, we're the party that believes in controlled immigration. We will reduce it to tens of thousands every year. I mean, are they simply lying to us?
They are absolutely lying. I mean, I kept an election address from 2010 from Cameron saying he was definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, going to bring mass immigration down to tens of thousands. And that must have been sent out to every person in the country. It's just pure lies. I mean, they've had 3 politicians over the yesteryears, if you like, Winston Churchill, Sir Cyril Osborne, and a man called John Enoch Powell, that talked about, controlling mass immigration. They didn't do it then, and they're certainly not going to do it now.
And do you think, Seamus, I mean, clearly, during the referendum, it was a massive bone of contention, hugely debated, and a motivator in terms of how people voted, probably on both sides of the argument. Given they won't even talk about it in Westminster, do you think it's gone away as an issue out there in Watford and elsewhere?
I don't think it has, to be honest. However, what they've done by not talking about it, they've turned the heat down on it. But if you suddenly talk about it, like you're talking about it tonight, they're going to, crack down like wildfire on someone. In essence, to subdue and subjugate debate. And that is what is so frustrating.
Seamus, you sound pretty hacked off with our political leaders.
Absolutely, and I don't know which way to turn, Nigel. There we go.
Yeah. But, Seamus, there are millions of you. I know it. Thank you. On Facebook, Katie says, because Leave voters were promised something that is impossible to deliver. No, Katie, it's absolutely possible to deliver this. There are 200 countries in the world who control who comes to live, work and settle there. That is what normal countries do, and that is what us Brexiteers want the United Kingdom to be, and it's perfectly possible. It just needs a government with the guts to do it. And if they can't even discuss it in Cabinet, doesn't seem there's an awful lot of hope. Sam says, cynically, because they have already sorted out the deal with the EU. Well, Sam, I am increasingly thinking that they're prepared to sacrifice almost anything to get a tariff-free deal, and that may well include the free movement of people, because the earliest this can be addressed is 2021, and I say that is the earliest. I like free movement of people. Stop the obsession with immigration. Change the record, says Matt. Matt, I've hardly mentioned it on this show for weeks. I've literally hardly mentioned it. In fact, I should be ashamed of myself. I should be talking about it a lot more, because even though the figure is down, it is still running. Net migration is still running at nearly 250,000 people every single year. And the impacts of that, not just on wages, but on primary school places, on housing, and yes, on our health service, is absolutely huge. Matthew is calling from Leicester. Good evening, Matthew.
Hi there, Nigel. How are you doing?
Well, I'm all right. Do you know what? I thought it was impossible, Matthew, for me to lose any more faith in our political lords and masters, but it does seem to be happening to me.
Well, I'm with you there. I must say up front, so you know where I am. I'm a Remainer, but I'm with you on the government ignoring the issue. But I've got a sneaky feeling I know why.
Right.
So a week or so back, there was a talk about Northern Ireland having to have an open border. I have a sneaky feeling that's why they're not talking about it, because they know that the DUP will run them over the coals if they try and say we're going to put some restrictions there again. Also, the Taoiseach of the Republic of Ireland will raise it in the EU and make sure the EU27 vote down any deal which says that we've got to have restrictions. And I think that is the ultimate problem with us closing our borders off. I don't agree with it. I'm a Remainer. I would prefer to have freedom of movement, but I think that's why and what's happening. We've got this issue that we can't annoy the Irish peoples. We made an agreement to them which outrules, as far as I'm concerned, any agreement we have with the EU27 for peace reasons. We need to keep that border open, and I think that's the problem they've got.
Well, you may be right, Matthew. I mean, there are some that say not just free movement of people, but regulatory alignment, that it's all about this argument over the Irish border. But, Matthew, do remember one thing, that the common travel area, the free movement of people between the United Kingdom and Ireland, has been in place since 1923. We don't really need any lessons from the European Commission on this, do we?
No, but while we are separate from the good old European Union, and we have, and we want to obviously at some point diverge away with regulations, putting movement restrictions, immigration restrictions, making the UK border force more prevalent to stop migration. That means at some point border patrols would have to be along that border in Northern Ireland with any logical plan we could come up with now. And this is the problem. Nobody's got any ideas of how to give what we want or what the people want, which is the Brexit agreement with less immigration, like you believe, at the same time as saying to the Irish peoples, we want a free and open border, because you can't have both cakes. You just can't. You need one or the other.
We've had that free movement, as I say, for almost 100 years. The issue could be, I accept, the issue could be that people, EU citizens or people from around the world, would use that open border as a means of getting into the United Kingdom. But then, of course, they could get to Northern Ireland. Be tough then to get from Northern Ireland across to the mainland, wouldn't it? Because you'd have to buy a plane ticket or book a ferry ticket or whatever it was. Matthew, you may be right. It may be the influence of Northern Ireland. I suspect that may be part of the equation. I just generally think that our political class would really rather not discuss immigration at all. It's too awkward. It's too difficult. And if you do dare talk about it, you won't get invited to the right dinner parties in Notting Hill. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Washington, D.C. It's 7:22.
LBC and its sister stations from Global bring you a brand new event, the Global Awards, rewarding the very best from the world of music, news and entertainment. The Global Awards.
And the award for Best News Moment, Interview or Debate goes to...
One incredible night with performances from Andrea Bocelli and Sam Smith performing live. And you can have your say on who will win at the Global Awards. Voting starts tomorrow. To vote, download the Global Player app or go to lbc.co.uk. March the 1st, 2018. The Global Awards. It's coming.
Today at Tesco, get crates of Budweiser, Corona and Coors for just £9. Everyone's welcome at Tesco. Selected stores excluding Express while stocks last. 18 plus ends 24th of December.
Crikey, the boiler's gone again. Cold showers. Oh, I'll have to get someone round and tidy up and get better biscuits. I've only got malted milk. I can't have no shower. I've got Zumba on Wednesday. Relax. Relax. It's Trust a Trader. Bloomin' lovely tradespeople who do the job right. You pop in your postcode and find great tradespeople right on your doorstep. Oh, he's here. Get the party rings out. Visit trustatrader.com.
Your company's image is everything. So why present your clients poorly bound documents with budget covers to save a few pounds when a quality wire binding machine starts from just £299 with single source binding? We supply fast, high-quality wire document binding machines and premium supplies, and we're so confident you'll love our easy-to-use machines that we're offering a free, no-obligation 1-week trial. For your free machine trial, just visit single-source.co.uk.
I'm there as she's rushed down the corridor of A&E. Her bloodied hands are hanging limp from the side of the hospital bed. She desperately needs a transfusion. She keeps asking for her fiancé. We turn the corner, and I'm here, finally, in the snack aisle. I pick up a selection of crisps before realising that I forgot the potatoes. Back to the fruit and veg aisle it is then. As a blood donor, you can save someone's life while going about yours. Register at blood.co.uk.
Jack here has got Kev on the phone. As a PlusNet customer, he has lots of friendly people that have his back. Say hi, Kev.
Hi, Kev. Hi?
He can call PlusNet any day of the week. They've already helped him pick a package, upgrade a package, check bills, move home, give him matrix, ordered SIMs, transferred numbers, added buttons, checked his connection speed. And Julie here even helped him settle on Mallorca for his next family holiday.
Don't forget the factor 30.
PlusNet has lots of friendly staff that just can't help but help. It's probably why they've bagged Uswitch as Best Provider for Customer Service Award. PlusNet will do you proud.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Live from Washington, call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
How can the Cabinet spend an hour and 45 minutes discussing Brexit and their plans for the future and not even discuss mass immigration into the UK from people with European Union passports? I mean, is it that they don't think it's a priority anymore? Well, I tell you what, it was a pretty big priority for 17.4 million people, because the biggest single issue that motivated people to go out and vote for Brexit was that part of getting back control of our country was taking back our borders and us deciding who comes to live, work and settle in our country. And yet they don't want to talk about it. Governments love mass immigration because it's a lazy way of boosting GDP and growth targets, I get on Twitter. Well, the GDP argument has been made to me time and again over the years, but GDP going up because population goes up does not mean GDP per head, per capita, goes up. Not one bit. Jamie said, what's good about immigration is that after March 2019, Britain can take full control of who enters our country. No, Jamie. We can't do that after 2019 because the Prime Minister is signing us up to a transition deal which, to quote the Chancellor of the Exchequer, will mean the status quo will be maintained. So it isn't going to happen in 2019. Patrick says no good brushing immigration under the carpet because somebody will trip and fall, and it could be the Tories. Janet says the European Union wants no borders, no nations or culture, just everyone the same. Well, that may be what they want, but I hope they're not going to get it. And we go out to the west coast of Canada to Nick, who's calling from Vancouver. Good evening, Nick.
Hi, Nigel. As an immigrant myself,
very good.
Qualified. I think the problem with immigration for the Tory party is like most problems with the Brexit argument. The thing, looking on the outside, looking in, immigrants are massively useful for your economy. And the British economy has essentially just got used to the idea that you don't have to train anybody. You don't have to. You don't really have to do a proper job of running your school, your technical colleges. You can just ship in very, very well qualified, very nice, very hardworking. Now, let's be honest. You know, my mum's nursing home is completely run by girls from Poland. They're bloody great. They really are. They're the best workers they've ever had at that nursing home. They come to Britain to work. You're getting the best of the best with immigrants. They come, you know, the lazy ones that sit on their couch eating cheese doodles stay back in Poland. The ones that the Britain gets, like the immigrants that Canada gets, are the ones that want to work. And so the British economy is completely dependent on it. It has been for decades now. And no one really wants to to ask the tough question of the British public: how much do you want to pay for your immigration policy? How much do you want to pay for your free market control? How much do you want to pay for Brexit?
Well, certainly, Nick.
I don't think anyone really wants to have that conversation.
Certainly, Nick. The big employers have been the strongest advocates for free movement and for big net migration numbers, because for them, and much of what you say is true, many of the people that come work very hard and are very good. There's no question about that. Not all. You know, we get some bad people too, but we do get a lot of good people. But of course, it's suited the big employers, Nick, because it's kept wages on the floor. That's been the effect of it, hasn't it? And the other thing I'm struck by the sheer amount of unskilled labour that's come into Britain, is it's also done nothing to help boost our already very weak productivity levels. So I do understand that big business wants this. But Nick, you can't. So yeah, wages would go up. And if you remember, during the referendum, you know, when the Remain campaign were asked, well, wouldn't the Leave policy lead to higher wages? They had to admit yes. So there is a price that employers would pay. But Nick, isn't this about the democratic will of the people being respected by the government?
Well, that's the thing, Nigel. I think, you know what? I think if the people of Britain, you know, at least the Leave side of it, the Conservative side of it, you know, we're clearly saying to the Tories, because it's just a Leave problem. It's not really a Remain problem. On the Remain side, everyone thinks it's going to cost a fortune, and that's just all there is to it. But on the Leave side, there has to be an acceptance that this will be painful. And I think the problem for May and her cabinet, and it'll be the same problem for Johnson and Gove or anybody else, is how much are the British people prepared to pay for their independence? It's going to be, I think it's going to be catastrophic. Painful.
Nick,
maybe that's worthwhile.
Nick, I know. Nick, right or wrong, Nick? Right or wrong, Nick? It's what people voted for, and we did have this argument. We voted to take back control of our country and its borders, and we're not getting it. And even if you're right, even if it cost us, I think that's still what people would want. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive on LBC, live from Washington. It's 7:30, and time for the news with Moira Alderson.
The ex-boyfriend of reality television star Fern McCann has been jailed for 20 years for spraying acid over a packed nightclub in East London. The judge at Wood Green Crown Court described Arthur Collins as an accomplished and calculated liar who'd shown not the slightest remorse. Police believe they foiled a Christmas terror plot following the arrests of 4 men in early early morning raids. A bomb squad was called to an address in Chesterfield. 3 other men were detained in Sheffield. Engineers have discovered a leak on Britain's largest ever warship, the HMS Queen Elizabeth. The £3.1 billion aircraft carrier was officially launched just over 2 weeks ago by the Queen. LBC weather, heavy rain for much of western Scotland tonight, cloudy and mild for most other places, colder in the southeast, an overnight low of 6 degrees.
LBC travel in Kent. There are severe delays on the anti-clockwise M25 at the Dartford Tunnel with queues back to junction 3 at Swanley. In Essex, there are long hold-ups too on the eastbound A13 from the Goresbrook interchange to the M25 at junction 30. It's the amount of Christmas shoppers heading to Lakeside. In Bedfordshire, it's very slow going on the northbound M1 between junction 8 at Hemel Hempstead and 11 at Luton. 2 lanes are closed following an accident. And in Leicestershire, the M1 is being...
This is LBC.
Crikey, the boiler's gone again. Cold showers. Oh, I'll have to get someone round and tidy up and get better biscuits. I've only got malted milk. I can't have no shower. I've got Zumba on Wednesday. Relax. Relax. It's Trust a Trader. Bloomin' lovely tradespeople who do the job right. You pop in your postcode and find great tradespeople right on your doorstep. Oh, he's here. Get the party rings out. Visit trustatrader.com.
To be honest, when I heard about this, I thought, you're having a laugh, aren't you? It's called the Smart Meter Power of 10p Challenge, where basically I had to feed as many bodybuilders as possible using just 10p of energy. No pressure then, guys.
Come on, Ainsley.
But after a manic cooking frenzy...
Stop, your 10p's up.
I still managed to prepare an incredible 14 meals. Get in there, my son.
See how far 10p could go in your home. Contact your energy supplier about getting your smart meter at no extra cost.
Could your business benefit from cloud accounting? Sage Business Cloud. Get paid faster by issuing invoices on the move. Complete your VAT return in seconds. And link your bank account for a real-time picture of your business finances. See how Sage Business Cloud can benefit your business with a free 30-day trial of Sage Accounting. Visit sage.co.uk/free trial. Sage Business Cloud. Helping you manage everything from money to people. Be Sage. Build on.
Is your company innovative, successful, or rapidly growing? If so, it's likely that you'll be carrying out all sorts of research and development, even if you don't think of it as such. Contact Barnes Rofe to find out if you qualify for an R&D tax credit claim. We'll help you make a claim and obtain a refund of the correct amount of tax for you. Sound interesting? Visit barnesrofe.com. Barnes Rofe, clever accountants for business.
I'm there as she's rushed down the corridor of A&E. Her bloodied hands are hanging limp from the side of the hospital bed. She desperately needs a transfusion. She keeps asking for her fiancé. We turn the corner, and I'm here, finally, in the snack aisle. I pick up a selection of crisps before realising that I forgot the potatoes. Back to the fruit and veg aisle it is then. As a blood donor, you can save someone's life while going about yours. Register at blood.co.uk.
The Nigel Farage Show, live from Washington only on LBC.
I said earlier it was a big day in Washington, Trump's tax reform, and we've got some breaking news from Capitol Hill. And joining me is Simon Marks, LBC's USA correspondent. What's the news?
Big news indeed for Donald Trump. Certainly very welcome news for the White House. By a vote of 227 to 203 within the last couple of minutes, the House of Representatives has passed Donald Trump's tax cut. $1.5 trillion in tax cuts that the president is planning to pass on to business and also to individuals here in the United States in what he argues will be an effort to assist the economic recovery that he, of course, claims is already well underway here. What happens next, Nigel, as you know, is that this all goes to the US Senate. Yeah. They will have to vote on this. Going to see a much smaller majority for the tax cuts in the Senate, but it looks as though the Republicans just about have the votes there after a couple of wavering Republicans said that they were in in fact going to vote in favour of this bill, and so the stage on the face of it is set for Donald Trump to get to sign this legislation into law before Christmas, which is something that he had pledged to the American public that he was going to do. And this is going to be, I think, something that not only the White House welcomes on its merits, because President Trump really wants to see these tax cuts go ahead, but it's also going to be something that they welcome because, honestly, after the end of this year, going forward into 2018, the legislative outlook for Donald Trump is very opaque, much more murky, and it's unclear just how much more legislation he will be able to get through Capitol Hill.
Because, of course, they have the midterms here in America.
Correct.
So in November next year, there'll be a lot of seats up for the Senate.
Absolutely. One third of the Senate, the entire House of Representatives. It is, believe it or not, election year next year, again in the United States, not for the presidency, but for Congress. And so members of Congress will be very anxious about their own re-election battles.
Now, whatever the consequences of this tax cut for the deficit, I used to say, these are the biggest tax cuts in America for 30 years?
Yes, this is a substantial tax cut that President Trump says is going to benefit grassroots supporters of his, middle-class voters all over the country, and certainly business owners, because you're going to see a dramatic reduction in the rates of corporate tax, corporation tax as you call it in the UK. There is, though, a very big question about all of this. As you intimated, there are projections that this is going to swell the deficit. The White House says you don't have to worry about that because trickle-down economics will create jobs, will create opportunity, and help advance the cause of the quest for prosperity here in the United States. The president's supporters say that his voters will rally around him because they will see that he's making good on another campaign pledge that he put forward in last year's presidential election. His critics say that many of his voters, when they discover exactly what is in this tax bill, will find that it's too beneficial for big business and insufficiently beneficial for individual taxpayers at home. So, it's not necessarily all good news over the long term for Donald Trump, but undoubtedly this is an important legislative victory for him.
It is. I mean, it's his first major legislative achievement, isn't it? Since
absolutely.
he became president. Now, also today, we understand there's been a telephone conversation that took place between, should we say, two rather different world leaders.
Yes, absolutely. Theresa May and Donald Trump have been on the phone with one another, and I think I'm right in saying this is the first time they have been on the phone together and spoken since the president made that rather curious decision to retweet those Britain First videos that, of course, Theresa May and the government back in London became so exercised over. There are two versions of what happened in the call. They're actually remarkably similar, one coming from Downing Street, the other one, again, within the last few minutes while we were listening to the news headlines being put out by the White House. They exchanged Christmas pleasantries, we're told. The Prime Minister offered her condolences over yesterday's train disaster out in Washington state. They discussed next steps in forging peace in the Middle East. This, of course, the first time they've spoken since Donald Trump formally recognised Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Both leaders emphasised the urgency of addressing the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. And President Trump, we are told, congratulated the Prime Minister on the decision by EU leaders to move to the second phase of the Brexit negotiations. About those Britain First videos, it seems from both readouts, the White House readout and the Downing Street readout, not a word was said, or if a word was said, it's certainly not being disclosed to reporters like me.
Interestingly, the two leaders of Britain First, their Twitter accounts were suspended yesterday, and quite a big purge by Twitter on what they thought are those peddling hate. I was also told earlier that the Prime Minister and the President agreed on the importance of a swift post-Brexit bilateral deal. The difficulty with that is, I think with Brexit, Trump thought we could sign this up within a few months. But of course, with the transition deal that the Prime Minister's now agreed to, it would be at least 2022 now before any bilateral trade deal could happen between the two countries.
And it's interesting that the only reference to that part of the conversation comes in the Downing Street readout of the call. There's no mention made of it in the White House readout of the call. President Trump, as you know better than anyone, before the inauguration, intimated that he was ready to at least begin the conversation about a post-Brexit trade deal. But definitely the US government has has realised that this is going to be a much more complex task than perhaps he at the time realised before the inauguration. Interesting that it's Downing Street that's saying they've agreed on the importance of a swift trade deal, not the White House.
No, I think the Americans have given up on it. Because I think if you say to the president, this can't happen until midway through your second term, it kind of stops being a priority. Any thoughts on the timing of this phone call?
Well, I mean, the timing's interesting because it is pre-Christmas, and perhaps it indicates on the part of the Prime Minister some sort of desire to improve the relationship, make up for the strains in the relationship that existed prior as a result of the Britain First retweeting. We still don't know officially the timing of a Donald Trump visit to London. There have been rumours, suggestions that it might happen in February, not the big state visit. No. I think it's pretty clear that that's on the back burner. But look, I mean, they're talking, and according to both of these readouts, they didn't have a terrible argument. So I suppose that's
got to be
slightly
a plus.
improved. It's a plus.
Got to be a plus.
Can I tell you one other thing very briefly? I was in Cuba last week, and very interesting, if you talk to Cuban government officials about Brexit and the implications about it, they say, well, you know, we don't really take much of a position on Brexit, but we do think it will be much better for Cuba-Britain trade ties if we can negotiate trade deals, they say, with Britain on its own, rather than having to deal with the whole European Union, and which they described as, you know, nightmarishly complex negotiations. At least on the island of Cuba, they seem to be quite in favour of a bilateral deal.
Nice to hear somebody in the world who thinks Brexit could be a good idea. And Simon, never a dull day in Washington. Given what's happened today, or is about to happen in the Senate, has happened already in the lower house, is that it now for a quiet Christmas?
I hope so. We were discussing that during the break, weren't we? Look, I mean, is it I think we have to keep an eye, as ever, on the unexpected here in Washington, D.C. This has been a year like no other that I've spent here. You never know what lies right around the corner. There is intense speculation about whether President Trump plans at any point to try and fire the special prosecutor, Robert Mueller. Is the White House hostility to Robert Mueller instead perhaps laying the groundwork for the president ultimately to pardon people who may be convicted as a result of the Mueller investigation? I think very, very dangerous in this town, particularly with the possibility of a government shutdown looming, one of those budgetary rows up on Capitol Hill. You can't rule out the possibility of a busy Christmas, but I am desperately hoping for a quiet one.
Well, one thing that won't close for Christmas, of course, is the president's Twitter account.
Exactly.
So, as you say, we never know. Simon Marks, thank you very much indeed
Nigel,
for joining me. Simon Marks there, LBC's USA correspondent. Back to the British Cabinet. An hour and 45 minutes of meetings. No discussion of immigration at all during that time. They clearly either don't think it's a priority or they're too scared to even talk about it. I wonder what James, who's calling from Barnes, makes of the complete no-show of immigration at the Cabinet meeting.
Nigel, you seem a bit you sound a bit desperate in your your preaching today, in as much as that now that it's been shown by nearly every single major economic brain that this is a ludicrous thing to do. So now your default is immigration. Are we talking about sort of black, Asian, Chinese? Who are we talking about, Nigel?
No, James, we're talking about EU migration. The British government can control non-EU migration. Now, it's a perfectly fair criticism to say we did it very badly, and particularly Theresa May, 6 years as Home Secretary, did it disastrously. But we do at least have control over that. What we don't have control over are the numbers of people who come to our country who've got EU passports, and that is what voters in the referendum were asking for. And anybody, any commentator, writer, radio talk show host who tries to pretend that the Brexit vote was about black people versus white people is completely missing the point.
Can I make a point?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that, and to give you your due, sir, I heard you actually say this, that, you know, the will of the people, which is said ad infinitum, the Brexit referendum, as you well know, was purely consultative. It was not set down in the statute that it had to become law under any stretch of the imagination. And the whole problem with all of this is you, really, because Mr. Cameron, as you know, only had this referendum to get the people that were voting for you, which is what he did. But at the end of the day, he should never have walked away and said, right, well, I'm having nothing to do with this then, because this is not the result I wanted. He should have made sure, and it doesn't really matter whether you agree with Brexit or not, the reality is it was a consultative referendum. There was no reason for it to become law or even any chance of it. But he walked away and he left something with Theresa May. And,
you know, James, when people like you say it was purely a consultative referendum and government does not have to carry out the will of that vote, you've got to understand, James, why people are getting so damned angry with that attitude, angry with our politicians, and I would suggest pretty angry that the Cabinet today didn't even discuss this issue. The gap between the politicians and the people just got a whole lot wider today. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Washington, D.C., and it's 7:48.
Coming up at 8 on LBC, Clive Bull.
A list of fat cat bosses has been published today, ordered by Theresa May. Is she right that huge salaries at the top are the unacceptable face of capitalism?
Clive Bull on LBC.
Merry Christmas. It's a phrase you'll hear a lot this time of year. But Christmas is not always happy, particularly for men involved in a divorce they didn't choose. Meanwhile, they await the outcome in someone else's home this Christmas. These men need more than the help of a good Cordell & Cordell lawyer. They need the hope and encouragement of a good friend. If I've described someone that you count among your friends, be sure to remember him in this season. Visit cordellcordell.co.uk. Cordell & Cordell, a partner men can count on.
Miss Dixon, the doctor will see you in room 2.
This year, GP appointments are available in your area over Christmas. If you need to see a doctor, contact your practice or visit nhs.uk/GP access for more information. Your NHS, here for you this Christmas.
You are the master of the main, the slicer and the sharer. For you are the Cavalier Carver. And this Christmas, Lidl salutes you with deluxe free-range fresh British turkey in store December the 19th. Every little thing for Christmas. Subject to availability. Excludes NI.
Could your business benefit from cloud accounting? Sage Business Cloud. Get paid faster by issuing invoices on the move. Complete your VAT return in seconds and link your bank account for a real-time picture of your business finances. See how Sage Business Cloud can benefit your business with a free 30-day trial of Sage Accounting. Visit sage.co.uk/free trial. Sage Business Cloud, helping you manage everything from money to people. Be Sage. Build on.
Is your company innovative, successful, or rapidly growing? If so, it's likely that you'll be carrying out all sorts of research and development, even if you don't think of it as such. Contact Barnes Rofe to find out if you qualify for an R&D tax credit claim. We'll help you make a claim and obtain a refund of the correct amount of tax for you. Sound interesting? Visit barnesrofe.com. Barnes Rofe, clever accountants for business.
The big red building on Golders Green Road.
At Gold's Menswear, big men can choose from a huge range of top designer suits, jackets, blazers and trousers. They can fit anyone, extra tall, short, portly and king size up to 70-inch chest, all with savings of up to 75% off RRP. Gold's also offer an alteration service while you wait, plus Loken Barker shoes too. Open Sunday to Wednesday till 6, Thursdays till late, half-day Friday.
The big red building on Golders Green Road.
The Nigel Farage Show, live from Washington, only on LBC.
The Labour Party, the Tory Party, the Liberal Democrats, none of them want to talk about immigration, and even a government elected saying that Brexit means Brexit and will bring the numbers of net migration into Britain down to tens of thousands, can't even discuss it in an hour and 45 cabinet meeting. Sarah on Facebook says, what's the logic in even having a vote when it's not being carried out by the government? Well, James in Barnes before the break said that the referendum was purely consultative. We didn't realise quite how much that meant until days like today. We're going to go to Denmark now, a country that has discussed immigration at great length and put some pretty tough controls in place. Patrick is calling from there, a new caller to the show. Good evening, Patrick.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you tonight?
Well, I'm fine. I just, my faith in our leaders, I mean, it gets lower by the day, Patrick. How can they not? Whatever your view on net migration into Britain from the EU and indeed the rest of the world, how can you have a nearly 2-hour cabinet meeting and not even discuss it?
Perhaps, Nigel, they've realised that stopping immigration from the EU is not the correct thing to do. Now, hear me out on this one. When I first went to Denmark 10 years ago, I filled in a form, and that form also exists on the gov.eu website, so I have it open now. And it clearly states that anyone migrating from any EU state into any other EU state has 3 months, just 3 months, to support themselves, after which they can be deported, and if they don't pay for their own travel, they get billed for the deportation. That was a fact. I filled that form in, but it seems that in the UK, this was never ever enforced, and I don't know why that was. Can
you imagine, Patrick, we had a court ruling last week that said we can't even deport homeless people with EU passports because that would break their human rights. Can you imagine, Patrick? Can you imagine what would happen if government officers went and knocked on the door of a flat somewhere in London and said to somebody who'd come from, let's say, Denmark, sorry, son, you've now been here over 90 days. You haven't got a job. In the back of the van, please. We're deporting you back through Dover. Can you imagine the hue and cry if anyone even attempted to do it? So what you've got here, Patrick, is theory and practice. In theory, if somebody after 3 months hasn't got a job, they can be asked to leave. But in practice, it's impossible.
It wasn't impossible. They made it very, very plain. They knew where I was. They could tell where I was working or if I wasn't working, because the Danish tax system is pretty strict, as you probably know yourself.
Yeah.
They would have moved me on, and they made it very, very clear that would be the case. I think that the whole process of the Brexit vote was wrong. They should have looked into the implications before the vote went ahead, rather than afterwards, cause and effect before you go to the voting system, because I don't think people knew what they were voting for, and I think certainly some people who voted for Brexit are now too ashamed to admit they didn't actually know what they were voting for. I mean, it was a single vote in or out. The customs union should have been there, and also the single market should also have been included within that vote. It should have been a 3 or 4 question vote, at least, minimum.
Well, the single market was boxed off, Patrick, in a sense, because all the leading Remainers and all the leading Leavers said voting leave meant leaving the single market. On the immigration question, I think what people voted for was to say we do not want the current huge net numbers coming into our country every single year. We want to return to a sense of post-war normality that we had for a 60-year period, and that basically work pretty well in our country. And you may be right, by the way, when you say that most of the cabinet probably do think that free movement of people within Europe is a good thing. I suspect they do think, as a majority, that. But what they're not doing, Patrick, is they're not addressing what was one of the key reasons, right or wrong, that people voted to leave. And I think that gives us, frankly, once again, quite a big democratic deficit.
It does, but at the same time, Nigel, I think the way it was conducted, the whole thing was conducted, and I'm afraid you're at fault there as well, standing in front of that bus, in front of all those immigrant pictures, that was the wrong thing to do in your place.
What was the wrong thing to do, Patrick? Was the wrong thing to point out what happened, or was the wrong thing what Angela Merkel said? Because that picture was a picture of Merkel's madness.
Regardless of what the picture was of, Nigel, it was the wrong thing to do to stand in front and preach in front of it. I mean, do those people have any right to their pictures being used on that bus? being used on numerous stations globally. I don't know.
Patrick, I mean, come on. One of the key points I was making is that these were not refugees. Did you see who the people were? They were 75% of them young men under the age of 30. And one of the things that Europe, or the European Union, has got catastrophically wrong, it's allowed people to come, 80% of whom would never, ever qualify as refugees under any traditional definition. I mean, they have got that wrong, Patrick. Would you not agree?
I don't know. Those people weren't asked. I don't know what their background was. They could have been escaping from civil war. They could have been economic.
Where were the women? Where were the women? Where were the children? Where were the elderly? Where, Patrick, whatever. We can agree to disagree on that. Interesting phone call. I thank you. Patrick making the point that in Denmark, when he went there 10 years ago, he was told he had 3 months to sort himself out or he wouldn't be welcome to stay. And I kind of believe that in Denmark because they've been strict about this. It wouldn't happen, I don't think, in our country. Impossible. My last caller on the subject is Evan from Slough. Good evening, Evan.
Hi, good evening. Hi, Nigel. The reason it wasn't discussed is because it is a red herring. It was used a lot, but it has absolutely nothing to do with Brexit. The reality, for me, as a Remain voter, I voted Remain because actually I want control of immigration, and the reason I see control of immigration is because Brexit is likely to actually increase immigration because the EU has an aging population, which means that the majority of people that come here are young working age people, and they're in short supply in Europe. Now, as Europe recovers, which it's doing right now, and we can see the pound devaluing, people begin to shift back to Europe. But if we leave, what we're going to do is expose ourselves to a global market where our wages are going to be pushed down. We can't, I mean, the UK has 65 million people, and I see you have a problem with that. But India has 1,300 million people. China has 1,300 million people. Those kind of trade agreements, competing with that kind of stuff, we're going to look at significant drops to our wages. If we make trade agreements, we're going to look at significant rises in immigration, of which we simply...
We do not, Evan, have to accept increases in immigration. Brexit gives us total freedom over this subject, and we can make big decisions on economically whether that's good or bad. Evan, I'm going to have to say goodbye and thank you. We've run out of time this evening. The point being that actually this isn't just about GDP. It isn't just about money. It isn't just about whether we're better off or perhaps even worse off. It's actually about cohesion, community, identity, society, and a feeling that net migration has been way too high for too long, and it's damaged many of those things. We want control of it back. Our cabinet won't even talk about it. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow at 7.